making a video. Might not get published. We'll just see how it goes. I just figured I'd play this Holiday LOL video. His last one, and on kinetic theory, and just see what kind of crap. It'll no doubt be a grotesque perversion of the reality. Oh, he actually plays parts of my video. Interesting. Anyway, let's see if he plays the parts that matter.
I've said it before. I'll say it again.
Can't hear him.
I said it in clear text comment, which you may obviously didn't comprehend. His answer was to my saying there is no conception of forces in his physics. His answer was, but I say, haven't you listened? I say forces all the time. That's right. That's how dumb you are.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I've only explained how I actually have a force that explains gravity, mechanical mechanism, actual physics, not bent space and, perverted dimensions and all of that kind of crap. And the same force, actually creates the forces that create magnetism and then causes electrons to basically push more force to create things called current. Okay. Just play your game.
You say you use the word forces when interchangeably, and I demonstrate this.
Yeah, that's right. They're all interchangeable. That's right. Every single thing is basically a force that isn't a proton or an electron, or a neutron. Those are the vague, hold it together things. Just have to draw a new diagram. The whole model of the atom is nonsense. Electrons don't have momentum. They don't go around. If they do anything, they sit in positions and they shoot a whole bunch of crap at another electron. Force crap. So all this stuff that isn't an electron or a proton, right? So all this stuff pushing those things together and apart, and our neutron is force. And the rest of the crap in the accelerators, it's all bullshit. You don't need any of those. You don't need quarks and all that crap.
In live video, that you use the word force interchangeable with your quanta.
Yes, that's exactly what I did, because that's exactly what it is, and I think I illustrated that over and over again. I mean, there's two things. There's the arrow things and the blob things. The electron, proton, and the arrow things. That's 99% of physics right there. Force and the things that move it around. Jeez, fuck.
And later on you deny that you do this.
Well, whatever. I deny that you can ever paraphrase the argument correctly, or in any kind of decent way, even. I mean, you just basically lie, like Piro. You're just both lying scum.
This is petty. Well, I'm telling you where you're wrong. Fundamentally wrong.
Well, you're not doing that, though. You're just making declarations that I have counter-argued, and you've paid no attention to the counter-arguments. You just keep making excuses for their lies, of regular physics. And yet you'll sit there and call them on it when it's to your, because you find it disagreeable that they'd use something like a virtual photon. And the irony is the virtual photon is they're basically describing the function my system provides, except it doesn't have to be virtual anymore. It doesn't have to be a fake concept. You're just behaving like an asshole.
It's better. Well, I don't know what to do for you.
You don't have to do anything for me. I'm just gonna, like I said, it's your reputation. You've basically demonstrated that you have no tolerance for hearing anything that's opposed to your rigid devotion to certain types of physics. And so you're just like Piro. You have your religion, and you don't want to hear about anything that's going to sit there and unravel it. I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if you didn't keep resorting to these grotesque perversions of what I say. I mean, it really isn't that complicated. I mean, first you complain that there's no difference, and then I point out how there's a difference. Yeah, green and blue is a difference. Newsflash. I mean, I've cut the universe down to so simple a thing. It's just momentum, little bits of momentum, and they have the simplest properties. They're blue or green, and they can, depending on how they're affected by the electrons and the protons, they can come in streams, in condensates, in compressions. Wow, that's just, whoa, and that's too much for you. It's too much for you to argue that. Instead, you have to pervert something that simple into something not that.
Alex.
I want to do this part. Speed it up.
Alex, it's the only conversation in town, so...
Well, it's rather rude to always begin this conversation the way you do.
No, the rudeness is just a fact of our conversation. That's right, because, this goes back to the whole, your silly arguments that you can't figure out what torture is, and the thems, it only matters to the them that they're being tortured, and whatever, like somehow that changes the fact that it's a fact in the universe. Yeah, I find it just grotesquely, obscenely offensive. That's right. That's worse than Hitler, in my opinion. I think Hitler knew that his dogs could feel. And it mattered how they felt.
Not terribly butthurt over it, but it just shows that you don't know when you're speaking to your better.
Oh, whatever that is. I'm speaking to what? yeah. Keep trying to talk an argument instead of proving one.
I am orders of magnitude better educated than yourself.
Oh, yeah, whatever that even means. You're educated in what form? And educated about what? Exactly. I'm not going to go through my life experience, but I think I could probably do the electrical wiring in a house better than you. I probably could install a furnace better than you. I could probably definitely do a roof better than you. I could probably solder circuit boards better than you. I mean, we could just go down the list of all the things I can do that you can't do. Well, yeah, so fuck you.
And you should listen. You're offering £5,000 to speak to a professor.
I don't really even give a shit even about speaking to one. I just want to defy one to sit there and debunk what I'm saying. I want somebody with a reputation who knows something about physics to sit there and actually make arguments explaining how Huygens makes sense. How it's not just a contrivance. Why would they make all of this? Why is the two-slit experiment so interesting when the single-slit experiment's doing the same thing and it's a lot harder to explain? Little things like that. I want him to not only defend his idiotic dark energy matter bullshit, all the crap they've made up in physics, but I just want him to debunk what I'm saying. Point out how it can't be that there's a material force creating gravity.
I'm actually...
Well, material in the sense that it's made out of actual something that's pushing the Earth into the sun.
Saving all that money. If you would listen.
Yeah, whatever. Your counter arguments have been vacuous. To argue that I don't have a theory because I haven't explained the origins of electrons is just so insensible. When physics doesn't waste any time trying to do that, seriously. There's no serious physicist saying, oh, I have to figure out the origins of electrons. I have to figure out how they were created in the universe. When we don't even know. The universe could be 1 trillion years old for all we know. Electrons could be like abiogenesis. It happened in a completely different chemical environment. A completely different kind of universe.
There's no notion of forces, because your entire physics is only made up of kinetic interaction of arrows with the You see,
Yeah, with the, yes, the properties that make it possible for change to happen. Duh.
I caveat that there's polarization change, a change of colour in the arrows. That being said, all interactions are exactly the same. So you can...
Well, again, I'm not going to argue. What can I say? I mean, I've drawn pictures of the interactions not being the same, okay? Blue goes in this way, it leaves going that way. Green goes in going this way, it leaves going that way. I think that's a difference. A 90-degree turn is a pretty substantial change. It's not the same anymore. Fuck. Cunt. I mean, there's no argument for that. You think that's a $5,000 argument against my theory, is that a 90-degree turn in energy is not an event.
You can phrase those reactions as you have them, as red in, red out, blue out, blue perpendicular, so on, red perpendicular, so on and so forth. Or you could say that that in that interaction there's a force, but it's really devoid of content because every interaction being the same. The notion of force.
Again, every interaction being the same. It's not every interaction is the same. Okay, the blue arrow hits and it reflects. The red arrow hits and it takes a 90-degree turn. That's not the same at all. It's not even anywhere close to the same. It's actually quite substantially and incredibly different. And I've explained how that creates repulsion and the absence of repulsion, which is attraction.
In that system, loses its meaning that it has in the everyday sense.
Yeah, well, whatever. So again, this is what you're saying is a qualified debunk. So I would put this on the scale compared to Feynman's silly argument that I will negate the existence of material gravity by comparing it to raindrops. He's a fucking physicist, all right, and he's going to start talking about a quanta theory, ultramundane particles, as if they're raindrops. It's like comparing light, the function of light, to water waves. I mean, it's kind of ludicrous.
It's as descriptive and as correct just to do as you started off saying, that it's red in, red out, or red in, blue, perpendicular, blue out, and whatever you say. Because in classical physics, in the common notion for a force is something that acts on a body.
Right, and that's what's getting acted on, is the electrons and the protons. And the way they're getting acted on means they're going to repel or attract. Asshole.
But you clearly
accelerate or deaccelerate, because that's all they can really do, because they can't do velocity.
State that your quanta forces don't act on the body. They act on one element and cause one element to leave.
So again, no, I point out in the drawing how it's inside the electron. I went through all that stuff. I said the arrow's moving inside the electron. It's obviously acting on the body that is the electron. It's not happening. There's not a non-event for the electron. It's an event for the electron. Fuck you.
Now, apart from what I've told you about the statistical nature of containing under this purely kinetic system, containing a structure in a random sea of balls.
Right, so that's the biggest universe now. So we were just jumping from the smallest to the biggest now. Obviously, inside of matter, it's not random anymore, you see. That's the whole structure of the matter. It's a really complex configuration of elements with all their little turns at just the right turns, all connected to each other, each one in a completely tied together pressure gradient where they're all communicating with each other with the force.
With a boundary is a statistical unlikelihood. Very much.
Well, so again, he's back to the argument of the creation of an electron. I state they exist. I don't have to explain how electrons exist. Nobody's explaining how quarks exist. This is not an expectation of regular physics. As you say, there's no statistical, you can't explain how they're created. I'm sure there's no statistical way they can explain it because they don't even have a mechanism controlling them. They're creating virtual photons, for fuck's sake. I'm certainly giving you a lot more than virtual photons as a containment mechanism. And here you are griping. I'm simply saying they're obviously compressed. Now, maybe they got compressed because when electrons really smash into each other, they compress the quanta into a blah blah, and that's how it happens. So the original polarization was loose, and then two hunks of polarization smashed into each other and compressed really hard, and it can never spring back again, so now it's an electron. And the same thing happened to the protons. And they just have different polarizations.
Likely. They will happen. They'll happen of varying densities, but they will just as quickly disintegrate.
All right, so whatever. So he says that he has somehow analyzed the details of my theory and found out it's statistically impossible for electrons to exist, even though I'm stating that I don't care how they got here. I'm accepting their existence, and I'm explaining to you they're durable. They don't just fall apart. Oh, fuck.
This is just statistical mechanics that I can't prove to you, but it's intuitive.
Okay, I can't prove a statistic. Well, I think that's the nature of statistics, that you should be able to prove it. So I don't think you, number one, I don't think you have any statistics based on my theory. I don't think you've done 1 day of math based on my theory. And so this is just another arrogant, obnoxious pile of shit from some authority who states it without any evidence. You state it's not possible. Well, I state it is. I mean, it's just like, again, like I said, where does he extend this expectation to anything in current physics? Where does string theory have to explain the existence of electrons? Where? Where in string theory is the creation of electrons?
The obvious. So I thought I'd just cover some egregious sections of the video.
Yeah, well, whatever. Your whole fucking attitude, your fucking everything you do is egregious.
You have no notion of force, ergo you have no notion of pressure.
Well, again, I've only explained the notion of force over and over again, and I don't even understand how you can say there's no notion of pressure when I explained. I don't have the blue diagram right here right now. The blues bounce off, and so blue on blue there gets to be a bunch of pressure. Red on blue, the red goes out the perpendicular. Blue on red, the blue goes out the perpendicular. I mean, I use the analogy of two mirrors, in that if the mirrors were polarized differently, and then you put two of the same polarization next to each other, the stuff would get stuck in between. But if you had two different ones, the stuff would all go through. There'd be nothing in between anymore.
No system, which I'll deal with in the clip.
Yeah, you won't deal with anything.
No, I have my same objections. Just these arrogant declarations, appeals to authority. We have a ton and ton. The evidence is just so overwhelming.
Well, I actually don't appeal to the evidence. In the criticisms, they're criticisms based on their own statements.
Yeah, so I don't even know what that means. They're criticisms based on my statements that don't have anything to do with the evidence that the description of the theory is meant to match. The theory intends to meet the standards established by experimental evidence. Jesus.
Readily extendable implications of the statements of your theory.
Another vacuous pile of nothing.
We just can't possibly come up with anything to overwhelm these volumes and volumes of verifications and just
Now, that's not the tone and sentiment of Heidegger's.
Yes, it is. It's exactly their tone. Again, when you're critiquing physics, yes, then everything's fine. They're all assholes making up bullshit. But when I critique them, I'm the asshole, and they're somehow gods who have been doing this for millions of years, and somehow they know what they're talking about, even when they're talking complete shit.
You may well find them arrogant and pompous and so on and so forth. That's because you just don't like what you're hearing. Yeah?
No, I don't like the tone of it, and I don't think it has any weight. There's nothing for me to argue. It's like fucking Pirro's non-existent evidence. Every time he flashes an image up, it's a piece of shit. Right? The sun doesn't make white light. So he puts up a chart. Well, look at that line. Is that white light? Yeah, it is, actually. If you actually look at the chart, the other stuff's all invisible. And the sun produces light that's exactly in the middle of the visible spectrum. Duh.
Oh, and perhaps don't even understand it.
Just written stone. So now it's obliging me to deal with Einstein moments.
I mean, the only reason I brought the white light of the sun was the example would be is that you could almost call that a standard. If the sun's color would change with regular velocities, slower velocities, it would be a great way to be able to tell how fast you're going. Shit. I mean, it would certainly be a giveaway if you're going half the speed of light. Then, yeah, redshift would be pretty convenient in the sense of figuring out that you're going fast. But if you have an image of the universe and all the suns are white, and all of a sudden you're going somewhere and they all turn blue, well, then I guess you know who's got velocity.
Now, yeah, you are obliged. That's our best theory, and the metric by which we judge it as the best theory is that it makes these predictions, and there's been experiments to verify those predictions.
Okay, that's fine. If that's what you want to argue, that this dark matter crap is a verification. Okay, that they never had any, they don't have any good pictures of this lensing thing that Einstein said the sun was supposed to be able to do. So apparently it's been verified, even though we know they haven't been able to verify it. The whole thing about science is they're supposed to be able to duplicate an experiment. If you can't duplicate it, it's not supposed to be counted. And yet they never duplicated, Eddington's experiment successfly.
The definition of
if your theory makes different predictions than the reality, conventional philosophy of science says your philosophy is wrong.
I don't even know what that means. My predictions are about things that are under dispute, and they're all going to be hard things to prove. But certainly I'm predicting that, yes, photons aren't Heisenberging, and they're not Huygensing. So there's two predictions right there. I'm going to predict that it will be found that photons in the two-slit experiment are hitting something, and the something is changing their direction, because photons aren't moved by force. And it will be found eventually that photons will not be moved by gravity. Those are predictions, yes. Now, you're going to tell me that the established science is overwhelming on those subjects. I'm going to say, ha ha, we can see whose ass your head's in, because you know the evidence still sucks. You're just lying if you're saying they've got good evidence of it.
The math that's associated and very indirectly associated, I would argue.
Yeah, and let's go to the math, right? Because, yes, the material gravity perfectly duplicates Einstein's math. No problem. And Newton's. It perfectly, it functions very fluidly, in terms of creating a mechanical model of real stuff to produce the effect. And I would argue that my model of magnetism does likewise for Maxwell's equations.
Highly strangled mathematics.
What is strangled mathematics?
Strangled mathematics is Huygens. Strangled mathematics is dark energy. Dark matter. That's strangled mathematics. When you just have to create a contrivance. Or you create a dead number, a number that doesn't exist in your equation, just to prevent it from going somewhere it can't go. that's strangled. When you create false stops of a fake constant, again, just to stop the math from going where your math already hasn't accounted properly for the variables, so your math goes places that would be impossible. Because your math isn't right, your formula isn't refined. Instead of saying the formula is not good enough yet, they fix it with fake crap.
Apart from mathematics you don't understand. It's actually a simple formula that comes out of some very basic assumptions and Pythagoras' theorem. This is 13, 14-year-old mathematics.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't see anybody else doing it, and I'm asking for simple mathematics. You got the two-slit experiment. Why don't you show me the simple mathematics of it being done correctly, where it actually predicts the two patterns blended into each other? Why don't you show me that mathematics and show me how it's not strangled? Because I'll show you how it's contrived. If they have it, it's contrived in the sense that they essentially figure out, okay, let's look at the pattern and now let's create a formula that creates the pattern. And I'll show you exactly where they do that.
High school mathematics.
And it's the same math that leads to the paradoxical circumstances where you could...
There are no paradoxes, i.e.
Well, okay, whatever. You're saying it's not a paradox to create an infinite gravity well. I'd say it's a paradox. To expect the force to be infinitely collectible. I can collect an infinite amount of force by just bending some more space.
As he suggests.
You know, see somebody die before you see somebody born.
No, there are no such paradoxes.
Well, yes, there are. I mean, I could play you the videos. You play clips all the time. I could play you all these really high-paid physicists talking about how the paradox exists.
In special and general relativity, causality is preserved.
Again, in how is it preserved in the circumstance where two events take place and you have that contraction crap?
Again, I'm arguing.
I mean, we're talking about speed of light, close to passing objects.
Show me a link. You're not arguing. You're just rambling.
Well, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to bother. I don't really give a shit about that part of the argument. You explained the light clock to me, and let's just argue about a light clock and what it's going to do when you're in a ship going half the speed of light. All right, so let's just talk about that, and you explain to me how anything you're talking about makes sense, or anything Piro is talking about makes any fucking sense at all. We'll just deal with that paradox. That somehow you can go half the speed of light in the same direction as light, and yet the light still gets away from you at the speed of light. Go ahead, explain that to me.
You're just rambling disagreement without presenting anything to give substance to those.
Well, whatever. I'm presenting enough of an argument to say, look, I don't think time's a dimension. And I said, what evidence do we really have of any of this crap? Is just the fact that matter is affected by velocity. That's the only association between Einstein shoving time into his stupid bent space. The only correlation that exists between those two things is that gravity causes acceleration at a similar parallel. They're parallel lines. So when you put them in bent space, they're parallel. Okay, acceleration is going to be equal to the amount of gravity. So that's why he put time in there, because it's connected to velocity. And Einstein knew he was looking for this, okay? They had talked, as soon as they knew there was a speed of light, a ton of people had talked about time travel and, what about going faster than the speed of light? And so Einstein wanted to connect it to something to make it stop, make it not go there. So he was perfectly aware of it. And it's just, and again, that's the only association. So he connected velocity to gravity through gravitational acceleration. And that's the only connection there is. But it has nothing to do with it. So again, I'm going to argue, I'll predict to you, okay, that yes, people will eventually learn, okay, that this was all a big pile of crap, that time isn't dimensional, you dumb fucks. Okay, you can either be playing a good game, like up to speed, or you're not up to speed. But that's all there is. And there are dead quiet frames. You know, the fact that there's relative speeds, who cares? There is such a thing as maximum speed, and there is such a thing as no speed.
Disagreements
is evidence of a failure, not a success in your math.
It's certainly unintuitive.
Well, no, it's a failure. I'm sorry, okay? When you're going in the same direction as something, all right, and it goes a constant speed, and you're going to claim that you're both going in the same direction, and yet it can go its constant speed faster than you. That's not a violation of intuition. It's a violation of reasoning and logic. It's a paradox. It's bullshit.
Understanding of functioning. So I don't know whether there's too much here to deal with. This guy did post a mock-up of some of the implications of my argument regarding velocity and how it affects whatever might be considered some sort of time value.
Could have paraphrased this part, I suppose. Move ahead where I'm not talking, he's talking. Oops, no, it isn't that long, really, Gary. You could have probably waited.
Not in any real world. It always goes the shortest distance. And
This is just nonsense what he's talking about. The Lorentz contraction is clear. The measured time from the point of the observer at the location, i.e. his clock, runs slower.
Yeah, again, but none of that can ever be verified. So, again, what's the point? You know, all we can do is take these material bodies and say, okay, we know that there's a connection in the sense that I'm going to argue there's a connection. I've already done that. But I'm certainly going to argue it's not time that's changed, it's function that changes. And I'm going to bet that every element you accelerate will survive the acceleration and the velocity and do its degrade differently. And on the subject of the contraction, it's just, you know, whatever. Who cares? But I think it sounds a little bit ludicrous, frankly. I mean, to say that that strong acceleration stretches everything and that velocity contracts everything. I'd say, again, that's a kind of a paradox. So once I get velocity, I'm a tiny little short thing. And then if I fall into a gravity well, I all of a sudden stretch into a spaghetti.
When it goes fast.
Shortest distance somehow is the longer path.
Now, I've tried for the longest while to talk to Emendum to point out that general relativity, which embodies
velocity,
also includes the notion of accelerated.
No, that's special relativity.
Frames of reference has to do with this, but this is special relativity we're talking about. That the Lorentz contraction talks about.
Again, I don't care about that, all right? It doesn't matter. The whole point that Einstein was saying was, look, light stays in the gravity longer, okay? Even though it's going straight, it doesn't really go straight. It actually bends and takes a long time and then gets to the other side at the speed of light, surprisingly. But somehow it's in the gravity twice as long. That's Einstein's fucking argument. That's why they did the fucking experiment. They wouldn't have done the experiment because lensing seemed impossible. And the only thing that made lensing seem possible to observe, to be able to see, was the fact that Einstein was basically arguing, no, the light's in the gravity twice as long, so it's going to get moved twice as much.
Kind of crap. So anyway, I'll play this a little bit here, I guess, but I don't... he assumes that, and it's just an assumption, and he tells me what my theory predicts, right?
This is fine.
I haven't even written up a prediction on the ratio of time dilation versus velocity.
Right, so what we're talking about here is a function where the input is the velocity and the output is time.
And again, so he's gonna tell me that thing somehow has to be some sort of standard curve or something. That I have to worry about exactly how and in what manner matter degrades when it has force in it, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, when this is the part I just figured out in the last 2 weeks, but when you have velocity, I was thinking about what your electrons and protons were doing, and I should have been thinking about all the stuff in between the electrons and protons that are making the electrons and protons attract and repel, which is all of that quanta, the force. And that's what you collect when you gain velocity. You gain a whole bunch of the stuff in between electrons and protons. And so yeah. So what was he saying? I forget. But anyway, we'll get to it.
Dilation.
Okay, yeah. And so what we're really talking about isn't so much. It's not as simple as my dancing analogy, because what we're really talking about is electrons channeling a bunch of energy, force. They're plasmaing it in currents inside the object. And the real question is that system might degrade at very high speeds, but be pretty durable all the way up to 50 miles an hour. So it's kind of like a car. A car is pretty durable. Once you take it over a couple hundred miles an hour, not so much.
No, you're right. No, that's right. It's
I'm just saying I have no obligation to quantify to make predictions about exactly what form of degrade matter is going to be in because of time dilation. And I'm just saying the amount of evidence they have now is scant, in the sense that we have muons and we have some other radioactive decay, and we have, as well, Pirro says the atomic clock is really an X-ray clock, but I'm sure it has to do with some sort of radioactive element that's producing the X-rays. But regardless, so how are you going to map this? Just to sit there and say we're going to pretend to draw a line based on what factor is drawing the line. I guess that's what I would say. I mean, all you're doing is inverting, right? You're just saying let's tie mass. Okay, now the mass of an object is what it has, electrons, protons, and neutrons, right? That's what they count when they count something's mass. So do you really understand what I'm saying? If I say to you that if you just count the electrons, the protons, and the neutrons, you're not counting any of the force that's holding them together. And so what I'm saying is what happens when something has velocity is you just put a whole bunch more crap inside of that atom. And that's the mass that matters, because that's the mass going in the direction of the velocity. And that's why when a bullet hits your head, it makes all of that mess, is because even though it's not a very heavy thing, okay, when you give it velocity, it means you gave it a whole bunch of force. And it's the force that just blew a hole in your head, not the bullet.
the output is the time dilation, so it's the 2 of the minus of the v squared and c squared.
Well, again, it's just this idea of mass, tying mass to velocity, okay? And what I'm arguing is it's not real mass, is it? I mean, it's not real mass in the sense of proton, electron, and neutron mass. It's mass in the stuff of that's what's the quanta that holds those things together, and the fact that it's pumping proportionally more of it. And how well it can do that at speed, I'm saying, I think you people who think you're going to be able to push matter anywhere near the speed of light are full of shit. And I'm saying there's one little bit of evidence that it doesn't happen. And that little bit of evidence is lots of shit blows up in the universe. And lots of matter is obligated to move at very, very high speed. And none of that matter ever survives that high speed.
Business that gives the Lorentz contraction the particular form at high velocities. What we're saying is it's the time Lorentz contraction is a function of velocity. So, and constant velocity. If you have a thing traveling at a particular velocity, if you know its velocity, you put it into the function machine and it pops out the answer. This is your time dilation, as observed from an external observer.
Again, yeah, and there's no, look, I'm just saying, you say this equation is right, that there's some sort of proportional relationship, and I'm saying, I bet you there probably isn't. But who cares? This isn't really, I mean, this argument can be interpreted either way, because neither one of us is ever going to have enough granularity in a theory. You're never going to show me your time dilator. You're not going to show me a mechanism that does this crap. So you're just basically saying, look, I have a couple of variables to play with, so I'm going to play with them mathematically. But I'd say it's a weak prediction.
But I guess I would argue that it's probably going to be parallel to anything Einstein comes up with relative to the increase in velocity as a ratio of acceleration.
Right, so what are you talking about acceleration for?
Because you have to be accelerated. That means you have to eat force to gain it. Okay, to have velocity, you have to first gain it from something. So you're obliged to go through the process of acceleration. And I guess what I'm going to argue is the process of acceleration is the process that's really going to tax the matter. And that's the place where it's going to fail.
The function is simple. Input your velocity, get output time dilation. Why are you talking about acceleration?
Well, I just explained it, but I'll explain it again, because just as it is for the physical human body, it's noticeably disruptive. That's why I'm talking about it. And so this pretend curve that we can acquire velocities without having to be accelerated, I guess if you spread acceleration over 1 billion years, well then, yeah, you could take the edge off of it. So I'm just saying that's going to be part of the equation, I suppose. Is because, again, I'm going to keep arguing that's what's really happening is you're taking a system. It's like a turbine on a dam or something. It's like any motor in the universe. It has a certain function, and as you take it to extremes, it starts to break down, and it starts to have friction and wobble, and all kinds of degrades happen at the end, at the extreme end. And, that's sort of like what Einstein's math is doing. But what is that based on except the slope of the gravity well? I mean, it's just an inverse of the, once the well starts going down, a little tiny angular change is a zillion miles of depth. And that's the problem.
So I think
that's another problem. You see about not.
I mean, that's the problem of having infinities in your equations, right? That's how you get unsustainable curves, right? You couldn't really have an unsustainable curve if you eliminated the possibility of infinity, right? So if you took infinity out, well, then it can't possibly be unsustainable,
Understanding forces and the nature of them acting on a body is forces act on bodies and produce acceleration. Ergo, acceleration is, by F equals ma, is a symptom of a force.
Is a symptom of a force. That's exactly my argument. So what is in dispute here? Yes, force is the only way you're going to move. Something has to force you to move. Electrons and protons do not move unless they are forced to. So if something material is moving, that means the electrons and the protons are moving, and that means something had to force them to do it because they don't want to do it. I mean, they have no interest in doing the velocity thing. You got to keep accelerating them. And I mean accelerating them in the sense that they have to keep the force. The force has to go into them, and it can't go out. If it got away, then they're going to stop. So the force has to be rotated. The wheel has to start turning.
Lorentz creates a funny curve, is that obviously the percentage of your velocity that's going to be due to your acceleration.
No, you're at a velocity, constant velocity. Under Newton's laws, you carry on that velocity.
Well, I thought the Lorentz thing was as you accelerate velocity, that was the curve. So I don't really understand. I thought the curve was based on as you increase velocity, then you get to this unsustainable dead end. I thought that was the point of the curve. If you're just going a constant velocity, why do I need to have this funky curve? Why wouldn't I just be a straight line forever?
I know you sometimes, want to reject this, but here you're failing to work from these assumptions.
Again, I don't even care. I mean, again, this is the stuff you care about just seems so distant from the the idea of unifying gravity, magnetism, and the nuclear forces, which I've just done, and instead we're wasting time with this crap.
There's nothing to do with acceleration. It's a function of velocity, the time dilation. Nothing to do with acceleration. This is a true statement after you've accelerated.
Well, I guess I just don't understand then. What's the curve? What's the curve? So if I'm going the same velocity, what's curving? Isn't my time dilation static? Isn't everything static if I just stay the same velocity? I don't understand what's curving. I thought it was time dilation that was curving. So if the time dilation is getting greater, then my velocity must be increasing. So I must have accelerated somewhere.
There's been a change in velocity. This is a statement about things at constant velocity, about things not accelerating.
Okay, I didn't understand what your curve was. Okay, so go ahead and then explain. This is what I thought he was linked to, or he showed an image of, or he was arguing with some asshole, and they were sitting there going back and forth about this. But look, this is the damn fucking curve he was talking about. The curve went like this. And it's like the Einstein curve of this is why you'll never be able to go faster than the speed of light, is because it becomes an unsustainable curve. You can't add any more because you need more energy than's in the entire universe to go this way any farther, because how much energy you need to do that. So I thought but I'm just saying, how is this a curve regarding this a set velocity? This is obviously an increasing velocity. Jesus Christ. No, whatever. Again, who cares? Like I said, this just has nothing to do with my theory. I mean, I really don't give a shit. Time dilation is almost a side subject of little interest. The only thing that it has interest to is because I brought up the subject of inertia, which I was actually explaining, and which I do explain now quite well with this whole force equation. You know, this absorbing of force and doing the square thing that the electrons can do. The four corners. Oh, anyway.
Are not accelerating anymore.
Your gravitational field, it's going to be a higher percentage.
It's nothing to do with gravitational fields.
In the beginning, than it is at the end. At the end, you have a very...
Well, look, it doesn't matter whether... to say it has nothing to do with the gravitational fields when all of Einstein's crap has basically to do with the equivalency principle. So everything is about a gravitational field in a sense. That is the easiest source of high acceleration.
High velocity, and the added acceleration is very small.
So this basic movement of the terms of reference about what's being spoken about, it belies in Mendon's ignorance.
I'm sorry, it doesn't belie any of that. You're the one who sit there and say this has somehow got to be important to me. And I'm saying I don't know why this has to be important to me. First off, I don't think you can prove any of this stuff at half the speed of light. You make claims. Okay, you're claiming that matter works perfectly fine at half the speed of light, and the only thing that's changed is everybody's just going slower because they're in a slow dimension, blah, 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 blah. I'm arguing that at half the speed of light, you possess more force mass than you possess actual mass. That is, you have more force in you. That means you have more quanta between the electrons than inside of the electrons. You're a plasma fucking engine. And I would argue that that plasma engine's going to blow the fuck up and it isn't going to be matter anymore. And I don't think there's ever going to be a time you're ever going to push a piece of matter anywhere near the half the speed of light. Fuck that bullshit. It ain't matter anymore.
Acceleration is to be under the criticism of the Lorentz contraction. Acceleration has nothing to do with the conversation.
So it's like a meteor coming into Earth. It could be moving very, very fast.
Well, again, to say acceleration has nothing to do with the curve of unsustainable, the curve of increased time dilation. I think there has to be an increase in velocity, and I think the increase in velocity has to take place with an acceleration. But whatever, fuck you, who cares?
And the contribution of the Earth's gravity will be very minor to its overall velocity, and so it creates a curve where it means a lot in the beginning and then it starts to mean nothing. Right?
This is irrelevant nonsense.
When it starts to go a straight line. So anyway, I don't see any reason why eventually it could be that the same scenario happens in what I'm describing.
Well, first of all, if you want to think, you can't even think about what I'm saying. It's, given the trivial nature of your theory.
Okay, so again, it's trivial. I mean, that, and that's the rhetoric you've clung to since the beginning in this conversation. And that's why you wonder I have so little patience with your nonsense. There's absolutely nothing trivial about it all. There's nothing trivial about the bullshit that's in physics. The grotesque woo. All right, this whole wave theory crap doesn't make any sense to even use the word like wave when it has nothing to do with a wave. We know it's friction that's creating frickin' waves, bulge waves in water. It's a thing for tension mechanics. So right away you have to say, what's the tension then? Okay, so the electromagnetic magic field is essentially, we're back to the ether theorist again. And I thought we already proved there couldn't be an ether. So how come Piro's interferometer hasn't proven the non-existence of the electromagnetic field? How come that field can survive the interferometer, but this other one can't? Oh, that's right, because somehow photons are afraid of gravity, but they're not afraid of magnetism. Wait, does that make a lot of sense to you? Well, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so to say my theory's trivial in the face of the lies about the double slit experiment, the whole obsession with turning everything into waves when they're not, and then on top of that, the crap like the dark energy, the dark matter, Huygens, even Heisenberg. These are all just evasions. Oh, it just happens to be that the smallest thing in the universe have magic powers. Oh, it just happens to be. It's just such a catch-22. It just happens to be. There is ESP, but only the invisible man has it. Oh. Fuck you to call me trivial. Fuck you. I'm gonna so fucking shove that piece of dirty toilet paper up your fucking nose, cunt.
Working out the consequences is rather easy. And that's what I've done for you, and I'm telling you. And if you could turn your mind to it correctly rather than invoking...
Yeah, what? Again, you haven't made a rational argument except to say, I haven't accounted for magic dust. I haven't accounted for Einstein's Tinkerbell theory. What I'm saying, all I have to do is account for fucking evidence. And I'm saying all the evidence says is there's a correlation between things not working as well and velocity. There's no fucking story about anything like time being anything. The matter is something. If anything, the clocks are broken. Ugh, fuck.
Comets coming in and gravity and all this obfuscation, you'd see that your theory can never match the Lorentz contraction as predicted in special relativity.
Again, how can it possibly be you declare that? All it is a proportional relationship. What is it besides a proportional relationship between real variables in the real world? What's the magic spent time variable? You tell me what that variable is, asshole. The only thing in the equation is mass, velocity, what else? Fuckhead, and bent. What else is in there? Which is gravity, or which is the bend associated with a gravitational bend by the equivalence principle. So by equivalence principle, it's a set amount of gravitational bend, spent space, that associates you with the space around you, and so you have bent space velocity. So what besides bent space, velocity, and mass are in the equation, jackass? And which one of them am I denying the existence of, jackass? I'm saying the bent space is force, and I'm saying the velocity is force. Fuck you.
Alright, let's move with that video. This is the video where he talks about a bit of increasing pressure because of the build-up of light. Now, light in classic...
The build-up of light. I'm talking about I was using that as an example, idiot. An example. So again, can't paraphrase correctly. I was using it as a metaphor. What if you had two mirrors and were bouncing light? That's what I said. It's an example, and you know it. So why are you perverting it? I mean, does this look like light? You know, my drawing of the protons and the electrons. Do they look like light?
Physics and in quantum physics exerts a pressure. That's because in quantum mechanics and in classical mechanics we have a consistent notion of a body that a force can act on. In Mendham's scheme, all forces are transparent.
To each other. To each other. Which is a proven already fact, asshole. Light doesn't affect magnetism. Magnetism doesn't affect light. Magnetism doesn't affect gravity. Gravity doesn't affect magnetism. Well, once the force is released, obviously.
With the exception of change of colour.
Oh yes, with the exception of a fundamental difference, which is a thing going this way goes 90 degrees different. Yes, it is just a pattern, but the pattern is important. It's the substance of the thing, by this definition. The substance of the thing, the only thing that makes it meaningful is its color. So if its color moves, that's important.
Interaction results in no trajectory changes.
Well, again, we already said this in the previous video. I pointed out in that video, if you go think about it again, remember I kept saying, the arrow's inside the electron. Remember I said like 4-7 times maybe? Look, it turned the arrow inside the electron. So again, he says there's no transfer of any force. There's, I mean, all you can say is lie some more, fuckhead.
Here's the way to explain it. Let's say I had two mirrors, and let's say they were perfect. So that meant any light between them just kept going back and forth, and it never deflected out. So you can sort of understand if I move.
You can sort of understand.
Put the two mirrors together, the light's gonna go back.
What the fuck is wrong with saying you can sort of understand that if I have two mirrors and there's light, there's things bouncing back and forth, that if I move them together, more stuff is going to be bouncing on the mirrors. You can sort of understand that, right? That's like pressure, right? You can sort of understand that, can't you? What the fuck is wrong with saying that, you stupid fucking cunt? I mean, I could sit there and make fun of every one of your little stupid personality quirks, you cunt. But I mean this stupid bullshit, like there was something wrong with the way I said that. Oh, and you say I'm not petty? I'm not a petty, fat, smelling like shit cunt. Yes, you are.
I could put a lot more often.
Yeah. That's dead right.
Oh yeah. So again, don't take it at all seriously. Just pretend you're not hearing it, and then pretend I didn't say it, right? You lying piece of fucking shit.
You hit the two surfaces of the mirrors a lot more often.
Yeah, it's gonna hit.
And it's light,
So this is how he listens. Yes, hit. This is what makes the whole universe work, right? This is really the argument. How do you build up pressure and how do you relieve pressure? That's the whole thing runs on. And he's mocking it.
always hits with exactly the same force. It's just going to keep reflecting, but you can sort of understand that there would be more.
Well, it only hits with a force in classical and quantum mechanics.
Well, again, we're talking about my theory. My theory, asshole. So he's saying, even though I'm saying right here to you that the blues don't get through, they bounce back and forth, they reflect. The red goes in, turns 90 degrees when it hits a blue. The blue, when it hits a red, turns 90 degrees. And when a red hits a red, it reflects. When a blue hits a blue, it reflects. What's so complicated? Is that really that complicated? And the trick is that if it's red on blue, then the stuff all leaks out. But if it's blue on blue, the stuff gets stuck. What's so hard to figure out? The blue stuff can't get out.
More pressure as you move the mirrors closer and closer.
But force, pressure is force divided by the area. Right? Since you have no notion of force, you have no notion of pressure.
Look, they're quanta, and I drew the picture of it, so this is just all more lies, right? You have 10 things bouncing back and forth a distance of a meter. If I make the distance a millimeter, you can sort of understand that those things that were going a long way before they bounced off anything are now going to be bouncing really, really fast. And so per second, there's going to be a lot of impacts. Where before, there were only 10 impacts per second. Now there's going to be 10,000 impacts per second. Fuck.
So what you're describing is correct, classically, but it isn't part of your theory.
Yeah. He's telling me it's not part of my theory. So there, okay, that's probably enough. The camera's going to go anyway. Isn't that enough? I mean, I'm sitting here describing it as my theory, and he sits there and says something like it's not part of my theory. I mean, and this guy saying he's a fair person, he's reasonable. I'm giving you the benefit of my education. So what was your teacher's name? Just so I can also write him on the plaque of should be pissed on, because he was obviously a disgusting douchebag. If he taught you that this is making a reasonable argument, or doing a fair debunk of somebody else's theory, that I'll just watch him say it and then I'll say he didn't say it. I mean, fuck, god damn, you just, fuck, you get what you deserve, you stupid, lousy, rotten, lying piece of crap. God damn it. It's not in my theory. I mean, I really should just find the picture for the sake of, just verifying that, yes, it is in my theory. And because you've all seen the picture over and over again. Especially in the last 2 weeks. It's, because it was like, hey, look what I found. I mean, this is it. This is finally it. This clears it all up. It's solid. It's great. It's fantastic. You're going to love this. Sorry, I got to find the pictures. The one with the, with the red lines going in. Well, I can't find it. Fuck it. But anyway. I mean, to say it's not part of my theory when I described it as this is exactly how the universe works. This is exactly what makes it work. Okay? The one kind of pressure escapes through the side, the other pressure can't. That's repulsion, and when the repulsion doesn't exist, it's attraction because the external pressure pushes it together. No such thing as real attraction. Just an absence of repulsion.